Attorney General William Barr's intelligence review should take a second look at the DNC server. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government. DailyTorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about Attorney General William Barr. He's conducting an intelligence review of the investigation into President Trump, his campaign, and supposed collusion with the Russian government in 2016. We now know from the Mueller report that there was no conspiracy with Russia by Trump to interfere in the elections, hack the DNC, or John Podesta emails and put them onto WikiLeaks. And so the Barr's taking a look at that. He wants to know about the origins of the investigation. Well, he should take a look at also the origins of the Russia investigation itself. Russia was accused by the DNC of hacking the DNC servers and putting the emails onto WikiLeaks. The same law firm, Perkins Coie, that hired Christopher Steele, former British spy, to make allegations that Trump was a Russian agent, that there was a well-developed conspiracy, quote, of cooperation between Trump and Russian leadership, and that the hacks had occurred with, quote, the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign. Perkins Coie, well, they're the same people who hired CrowdStrike to produce the assessment that Russia had hacked the DNC in the first place. So that's interesting. We should take a look to make certain that there was no coordination in those two assessments. Barr has previously said that a serious red line, quote, has been crossed by spying on the Trump campaign during the 2016 elections. And now we know from the Mueller report that there was no reason to. There was no conspiracy. From the Mueller report, quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities, and, quote, the evidence does not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference. So now we need to look at other sources that occur in the Mueller report, the FISA application against Carter Page, the Steele dossier, and we need to figure out what's what with these sources, because obviously some of the information was not good information. The Hill's John Solomon just found that one of the sources is said to be linked to Paul Manafort, Konstantin Kilimnik, was actually reporting to U.S. State Department. He was an American intelligence asset, but he was said in the Mueller report to be a Russian intelligence asset. And so here it is from the Mueller report. On August 2, 2016, Paul Manafort met with Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Well, according to John Solomon, actually he has ties to the U.S. State Department. And, quote, this is Solomon. What it doesn't state is that Kilimnik was a sensitive intelligence source for state going back to at least 2013, while he was still working for Manafort, according to FBI and State Department memos I've reviewed. That's John Solomon again, The Hill. This is very revealing. I mean, it means that some of the Russian agents in the Mueller report may not have been Russian agents, or maybe they were double agents. In any event, this exculpatory information where Kilimnik is reporting to the State Department was kept out of public view, and it causes us to question other supposed Russian agents that appear in the in this whole narrative. So if he's not a Russian agent, but an intelligence asset for the State Department, it calls into question the targeting of Manafort and the Trump-Russia conspiracy probe altogether. And I mean, Kilimnik was also indicted, so I suppose it could call that into question as well. But again, we should have seen this exculpatory information. And this is not the first time that individuals tied up in the Trump-Russia conspiracy probe. It was a conspiracy theory, we now know. This is not the first time that they've been tied to Russian agents that may not have been Russian agents. George Papadopoulos factors heavily into this. His new book, Deep State Target, How I Was Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down President Trump, makes the allegation that Joseph Mifsud, this professor, that he supposedly told him that the Russians had Hillary Clinton private server emails. He says he wasn't linked to Russian intelligence, but Western intelligence. That changes the whole complexion of the allegations against him, frankly. He wrote his book in the Wall Street Journal op-ed. Papadopoulos named Stefan Halper as an FBI informant, as well as Australian diplomat Alexander Downer and Mifsud, as all being individuals who spied on him. Now, the Mueller report had Papadopoulos talking to Mifsud, and supposedly that meeting, after he tells Alexander Downer, is the reason why the Russian Trump investigation began. But according to Papadopoulos on Twitter, he says that a woman in London who was the FBI's legal attaché encouraged me to meet Joseph Mifsud in Rome in March of 2016. So if that happened, that would mean that the FBI was targeting Papadopoulos long before he ever talked to Downer about this. So this is back in March of 2016. If the investigation doesn't begin until July of 2016, well, why is the FBI telling Papadopoulos to meet with Joseph Mifsud? And why is he shown here pictured with Boris Johnson, British foreign minister? It seems like maybe Mifsud has more connections with the West and Great Britain, the United Kingdom, than he does with Russia. Maybe he knew people in Russia, but it's hard to say that this person is necessarily a Russian agent when the FBI is encouraging Papadopoulos to meet him. And so there's other things to call into question with the Papadopoulos affair. For one thing, Mueller never says that Papadopoulos was meeting with Russian agents. He only says that they were people that Papadopoulos thought were connected to Russia. So Mifsud, per the special counsel, quote, claimed to have substantial connections with Russian government officials. There was also a meeting with Vladimir Putin's niece. Only problem is Putin doesn't have a niece. But again, per Mueller's statement of offense against Papadopoulos, he only, quote, believed she had connections to Russian government officials. He was also introduced to, quote, an individual in Moscow who told the defendant he had connections to the Russian foreign ministry. And so nowhere does Mueller even say that Papadopoulos was actually meeting with bona fide Russian agents. And maybe the reason for that is he wasn't. In the dossier now with that said that there was a conspiracy between Trump and Russia, that the hacks of the DNC had occurred with, quote, the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. Well, what you have there is that Russian agents that supposedly sourced this information to Steele, who handed it off to the FBI. A source G was a senior Kremlin official. Source E was an ethnic Russian close associate. You also have a senior Russian financial official, a senior Russian foreign ministry figure. And these are who Steele said were the people that told him about this Trump-Russia conspiracy. In the meantime, the Mueller report found no Trump-Russia conspiracy, so the information was not good. And it's very specific to these figures. Manafort, Page, had the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court Act warrant taken out against him. Manafort, we mentioned, he was tied to Kilimnik. But according to Mueller, in particular, the office, quote, did not find evidence likely to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that campaign officials such as Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, and Carter Page acted as agents of the Russian government or at its direction, control, or request during the relevant time period. Michael Cohen was also said in the Steele dossier to have gone to Prague in the summer of 2016 to meet with Russian agents to mop up the mess of WikiLeaks and the hacking. But according to Mueller, quote, Cohen had never traveled to Prague, so that was bad information too. And so Steele, basically, are these real Russian agents that he was talking to? In court testimony, he said that it could have been Russian disinformation. Quote, all material contained that risk. And he also said that the information needed to, quote, be further corroborated and verified. It's meaning he didn't have a fully good read on it. He used a network of informants who reported back to him about what these people in Russia were supposedly saying. So he didn't have a direct tie to them. He wasn't an eyewitness to the allegations that were made to the FISA court. And so the FISA court needs to be looked at too, because they were reports of Russian agents, but they may not have been Russian agents who were talking to. There's other instances. Carter Page was said to have met with Igor Sechin. This was from the dossier, and they include the absurd allegation that Page had been offered a 19% stake in Rosneft, Russia's state oil company, that would have been worth billions of dollars. But there's no mention of any meeting with Sechin in the Mueller report. And again, Page, he wasn't charged with anything. He traveled to Russia in 2016, the summer, to deliver a commencement address at the New Economic School in Moscow, but he was not a Russian agent, per the Mueller report. So again, more Igor Sechin. There was no meeting there either. So are there any real Russian agents? That's why William Barr, he should be taking a look at the DNC server. We need to know if the intelligence that went into the assessment that was paid for by the DNC, whether it was legitimate or not. They just need to take a look. I mean, FBI Director James Comey testified in January of 2017 that the FBI never took possession of the DNC server. Quote, ultimately, what was agreed to is the private company would share with us what they saw. And then if you look at a statement from CrowdStrike in July of 2017 to the Washington Times, it states, in May 2016, CrowdStrike was brought in to investigate the DNC network for signs of compromise, and under their direction, we fully cooperated with every U.S. government request. That cooperation included providing the forensic images of the DNC systems to the FBI, along with our investigation report and findings. Those agencies reviewed and subsequently independently validated our analysis. But what that means is they never had a verifiable chain of evidence. They had copies of the server, and copies of the server, even if the analysis was valid, that wouldn't hold up in a court of law. In the meantime, the Justice Department has an outstanding indictment of the Russian intelligence officers, and Barr has to do something with that. Is he going to pursue that case or not? And the problem with the chain of evidence is that this is from Adam Stone in 2015, and I include this as a general matter, but just to illustrate the problems with with digital evidence and a legal chain of custody that is necessary in order to be utilized in a court of law. Stone wrote in 2015, quote, without the right protections, digital files can easily be deleted, edited, or even fabricated. So documenting a digital chain of custody is all the more important. A compromised chain can undo a legal proceeding and lay waste to years of investigation. And all a defense attorney has to do is successfully raise concerns about potential tainting of evidence. That alone is enough, let alone demonstrating actual taint. So again, the analysis of the DNC server could be wholly legitimate, but because the DNC didn't give the FBI access to that, that might not be admissible in a court of law. Now, others have, for example, Forensicator. This is a blog on WordPress that you can read. Transfer rate suggests Guccifer 2. He was supposedly the source. Mueller says is the source for the DNC hacks, and that goes to WikiLeaks. But according to this, they weren't hacked. It was uploaded to a thumb drive. So maybe there are questions that are being raised. So Barr needs to look at that. He needs to figure out whether it was a thumb drive, whether there was a hack. And to do that, you need to take a look at the servers. But that might not be possible anymore. The DNC sued Russia, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign in 2018. And they included a bit about what happened to the servers. Quote, as a result of the persistence of the Russian state-sponsored infiltration, in order to remove the unauthorized users from its network, the DNC was required to decommission more than 140 servers, remove and reinstall all software, including the operating systems, for more than 180 computers, and rebuild at least 11 servers. All the evidence for the hack should be on those servers. It should be on those systems that were affected by the malware. But without the servers, it may be hard or difficult for the Justice Department to now go back and look. But Barr needs to go and look at those. Take a second look. The fact that they destroyed the servers or copied over them, reinstalled software, removing the evidence, that's a problem. How are we supposed to get to the bottom of how this investigation started? How are we supposed to determine whether there was coordination between the formulation of the Steele dossier and the assessment that Russia was behind the DNC hacks? We need to get to the bottom of that. That's important information. And Barr has every right to look at that. He should look at that. He can declassify information. And if necessary, he should go to the DNC and say, I need that server. We can't get to the bottom of this without the servers. We have to take a second look at that. And I think that's warranted. I mean, you also had the intelligence community did an assessment in January of 2017 about the Russian hack. And this is where they say that Russia was trying to help Trump. Which was fairly outrageous that this was ever made public. But it says, quote, we assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. It also said, quote, we also assess Putin and the Russian government aspired to help President-elect Trump's election chances when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorably to him. And so supposedly the DNC hacks were perpetrated to help President Trump win the election by Russia. And that's the U.S. intelligence community. That they're the ones who are saying that. And so Barr should get to the bottom of that assessment. It's critical. That finding is critical because you have now an instance where we now know that Russian sources, Kremlin sources, were the ones who gave the information in the Steele dossier. Well, if Russians were telling Steele, who was telling the FBI, that Trump was a Russian agent, and then per the Mueller report, we know he wasn't a Russian agent, or his campaign for that matter, then that means they were lying to Steele. Or worse, Steele himself was lying, and these Russian agents were just fictions. There was no conversation with them. And so that was in any event, maybe Russia hacked the DNC. Maybe they were trying to help out Trump. Maybe the Steele dossier was the reason they thought that. Maybe the Steele dossier factored into the intelligence assessment that was done by in January 2017. Again, this investigation was carried over into the Trump administration after the election, but you have the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign, the opposition party in an election year. This is going on. There's all these allegations, and we still don't know much else from what we knew back in 2016. Barr needs to get to the bottom of what happened here. And one final note, he can probably get to Julian Assange. He's being held in custody in the United Kingdom. He should be questioned. If anyone can tell us what happened with these hacks, I mean, Assange has said all along that it wasn't Russia. Does he still believe that? Well, the Barr should question him. They should send people there to talk to him and find out what really happened with these DNC and John Podesta emails going on to WikiLeaks. Was there some inside source, or was it a hack by the Russians? We need to close the book on this, but we also need to see how much the Steele allegations factored into the intelligence community assessment, and also if there was any coordination in the Russia did it on the hack assessment and the Steele dossier, which also made the same allegation. And they were all paid, both were paid for by Perkins Coie. They were hired by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And so we got to know. We got to know if this was just all a concoction, a setup. Was Russia really responsible for the hacking? If so, why did they think that Trump did it? What made them say that Trump was the one involved? And how did this Steele dossier factor into that? Barr can answer all these questions by conducting a thorough investigation of the origins here. He's promised to do that. He wants to find out if the intelligence was adequately predicated. I think that's a good thing. And so he needs to take a second look, not just at the Trump-Russia investigation, but the Russia investigation itself, the intelligence assessment, and see what really happened on the DNC servers. We have to know. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a great day.